Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Moisegate Podcast. I am Matt Moody, taking this solo on this fine Friday morning. Gonna jam this out real quick before heading over to the Rolf for the outdoor World Juniors game between USA and Canada. So let's get this show on the road, get this out to the listeners by maybe 11 o'clock Eastern. Hopefully that's more than enough time for whoever to listen to a quick, tidy, nice little breakdown of this 11-game daily fantasy NHL slate. So I had a pretty fun Thursday night. Not only did I roster Mr. Thomas Vanek, who went completely bonkers, 5-point effort for 15 DraftKings points, but I surrounded it with some decent parts. Nothing crazy, but definitely, always better to be on the winning column than the losing column. And saw some pretty great World Junior hockey action. USA really blew it against Slovakia. Luckily, I don't really invest myself in any individual team just because it's so much fun to watch, and I highly recommend if you've yet to. It's such great entertainment during the day. I guess kind of missed it because this week were the early games, and then we're going into the weekend and then the medal round. But either way, it's still just an incredible time. And if you're a hockey fan, it's some of the best hockey you'll ever watch. So that said, let's jam this real quick. Starting off with the games, we got Buffalo at New Jersey, Columbus at Ottawa, the Rangers at Detroit, Philly at Tampa, Pittsburgh at Carolina, Nashville at Minnesota, the Islanders at Winnipeg, St. Louis at Dallas, Toronto at Colorado, Chicago at Edmonton, Calgary at Anaheim. So a lot of teams on back-to-backs. Let's just scan through real quick. Philly, Tampa playing each other, both on a back-to-back. Toronto on a back-to-back, a road back-to-back in Colorado, Chicago, road back-to-back in Edmonton, and Calgary, road back-to-back in Anaheim. So pretty interesting. I guess some of the major news is that Mark Scheifele for Winnipeg is out long-term. Certainly not good, but definitely probably the biggest, new news that we have coming into the slate. So let's go game by game, starting with Buffalo at New Jersey. New Jersey just continues to crush it, leading the Metro Division, which is downright insane. I mean, who would have suspected that in January almost, New Jersey and the Vegas Golden Knights would be leading their respective divisions? I certainly did not. New Jersey is 7-2-1 over their last 10 games. Also apologize for this little stuffiness I got, but gonna power through. Hopefully it isn't too annoying to whoever opts to listen to this show. But yeah, so New Jersey's really playing just spectacularly right now. I don't know how much to read into that. I mean, I still think they're a team that you can exploit by targeting them on defense. And for right now, I think their main piece that I love targeting was Kyle Palmieri playing with Hall and Hischier. That did not happen last game. Hischier, Hall, Bratt ended up being the line. So it makes it a bit more risky to play Palmieri, just given that he's not really playing with Taylor Hall at the moment. Interestingly, we saw Will Butcher's minutes get just tanked last game. He only played 13 minutes, still has that power play 1 role, but for a guy who's super cheap and has a decent amount of assist upside, I just don't think you can play him, even when because he's getting 13 minutes now versus like a 18 to 19 that I was before. But yeah, Travis Zajac on that first unit instead of Nico Hischier really makes Hischier kind of thin, I guess. 5,300 for a guy who is not even first power play is just kind of silly, if you ask me. he did have 2 goals last game, which obviously bodes well in a matchup with the Buffalo Sabres, who are pretty much the worst team maybe ever. Um, but, you know, we still have a guy like Jack Eichel at 7.1. Over the last 10 games, he is averaging 5.5 DraftKings points per game. Uh, you know, like I said, Buffalo is not good, but Jack Eichel most definitely is. And he's one of the few centers out here who actually have like really, really, really strong shot floors. So I kind of try to compare him to a guy like Tyler Seguin. Seguin over the last 10 games has 7 more shots on goal. It's 42-35. But Eichel is leading in the points race, 13-7. So like, Eichel's just doing it all right now. He's playing spectacular hockey, and New Jersey is certainly subject to giving up goals. So I'm not even going to entertain the idea of any other Buffalo Sabres, like maybe Zemgus Girgensons, because he's playing alongside Eichel, and because of that has 2 goals in 2 games now. But Girgensons only played 17 and then 14 minutes in those 2 games. So it's not like they're glued at the hip and it's a must play if you play Eichel, just a decent way to get exposure. So moving over to Columbus at Ottawa, we did see that Columbus made a few changes, mostly expected, for their last game against Pittsburgh, with pretty much everyone out. Wenberg, Dubinsky, and Atkinson all out for the foreseeable future. There's some conflicting reports as of. Let me just make sure nothing changed in the last 15 minutes, but Zach Werenski did not play in a decent role in practice yesterday. However, like he played on the 4th pairing essentially in practice. However, this morning Columbus sent down Gabriel Carlsson to the AHL, which makes you suspect that Werenski's ready to go. Otherwise, they would have no reason to make such a move. But I think it also could just be because Carlsson only played 11 minutes last game, and they just want to give it to someone else. So keeping an eye on that. I mean, we should get that news well before 7 o'clock. I'm guessing it'll come out like before noon even. If Werenski is out, Seth Jones is a really, really, really strong play against an Ottawa team that's struggled to do much of anything. As Jones played 30 minutes last game, had the monopoly on the power play time. And then a cheaper guy is Nudi Vara, who was Jones's partner and played 24 minutes, including power play 2 time. So 3,000 for Nudi Vara makes a ton of sense if Werenski is out again. And then at forward, we have top 6 of Anderson, Dubois, Panarin, Jenner, Foligno, Bjorkstrand. So Bjorkstrand played 17 minutes in their last game. Didn't have much production to show for it. Picked up an assist and a shot on goal. But, buying long-term on talent like that, even when the shot floor hasn't really been there lately, I don't think that's a terrible play, especially in tournaments at 4,100, given that he's first power play, second line currently. But I think this really just accentuates just how important this Anderson, Dubois, Panarin line is to the team. And Artemi Panarin, I mean, he's still only 6,400. He's been just hot fire the last really 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. He's coming off of games. Last 3 games, he has a goal and an assist, 7 DraftKings points, an assist, 2.5 DraftKings points, and 2 goals for 8 DraftKings points, playing 22 or more minutes in each of those games. Like, clearly they're just going to ride this line as long as they can before Dubinsky, Atkinson, Wenberg all come back into the lineup. So for me, with Columbus, it's really just this first power play unit that I'm interested in Jones, Anderson, Panarin, Dubois, Bjorkstrand. And then if Werenski's out, I think you can certainly get away with playing Nudi Vara as just a really cheap, solid option on defense. So on the Ottawa side, I mean, it's pretty simple. Mike Hoffman remains 5,000 on DraftKings. If you look at the sim for today, Hoffman is the fifth highest rated cash play, behind only Kucherov, Tavares, Gossespierre, which is an interesting name to jump up here because he's not someone we normally see, Voracek, and obviously Mike Hoffman. So really, I'm just going to continue to play Mike Hoffman. I don't suspect that the injury he suffered last game is anything, serious. Given that he did come back, I believe late in the second, because you look at his game log and you'll see that he only played 12 minutes last game. He got rocked, I think, by Riley Nash. Probably went for like a concussion protocol or something. I didn't actually get a good word of what happened to him, but definitely saw that he was shaken up and had to leave. Came back, played a pretty normal shift after he returned. So the only problem with that is a normal shift in Ottawa is not very normal. It's not very predictable, which I do like for playing Hoffman as a one-off play. Um, However, there's not a whole lot of certainty with like who you can stack him with. So I would probably just stick to the first power play. You got Carlson, Hoffman, Stone, and then Brassard and Duchesne. So grabbing some of those guys like Mark Stone, I think is just kind of silly to be priced at. And actually, he's fallen way down in price. Excuse me, because as of 2 weeks ago, he was 6,600. Now he is 5,100. Certainly not a floor guy at all. He's not going to put up the floor numbers that'll make you happy. But on the power play, a guy has 32 points in 35 games. Like sharing a power play with Hoffman and Carlson, I think there's worse ways to go than Mark Stone, given the sick amount of minutes that Mark Stone plays on a regular basis. So there is the Ottawa love that I will continue to profess, even in pretty downright terrible matchups. Like against Columbus is not one that I love because one, they don't take penalties, and two, they're pretty good at 5-on-5. And three, if you even, I don't weigh this much, but they do have Sergei Bobrovsky. So definitely something that's scary. Moving over to the Rangers at Detroit. Last game, Chris Kreider left. Looks like he is out for a decent amount of time at least. So we got updated, I guess, power play units, lines, and Rick Nash is now playing alongside Zibanejad and Zuccarello at 5-on-5 and on the power play 1. So I am all about that. Rick Nash is one of really, he's the only New York Ranger who has any sort of consistent shot floor. So now that he's moved from the second unit to the first power play unit, really just taking the Chris Kreider role, I think that he makes a lot more sense than Kreider does playing the same role. Given his daily fantasy profile, really probably is optimized for, or his real life role is optimized for daily fantasy because he is such a volume shooter and just loves to crash the net and get pucks on net and just does a lot for your daily fantasy team, even if he doesn't score a goal. So last game, when Kreider went out, he stepped in, got 6 shots on goal against the Capitals. In a pretty good matchup against Detroit, I would not be surprised to see that happen again. As far as anything else goes, Zibanejad is someone who I've really been trying to play since he came back from injury, but it's scary rostering anyone from the Rangers just because they are so hot and cold with who AV likes on a given night and who he doesn't. So you'll see Zibanejad's price hasn't even moved at all yet since coming back from injury. He's played 13, 18, 12, 18 minutes with almost zero, with no point production and very little shot production. So I have no interest in Zibanejad or Zuccarello personally. Nash is only a one-off play with potentially Kevin Shattenkirk at 4,800 as a GPP only, stacking with Rick Nash and hoping that Nash like deflects a puck in or something. Just because Shattenkirk has not been very productive, and he's the type of guy who can certainly fall out of favor with AV on a given night if he makes a simple mistake or whatever. Detroit side, I feel like a donkey because I was like, yeah, Justin Applicator playing first power play, like first line, like could be all right. They lose 3-1, but Applicator gets a goal, 4.5 DraftKings points for 3,200. I am not going to go back to that well, even though I do think targeting the Rangers is a good idea in general. I'm not counting on lightning striking twice in Justin freaking Applicator producing on a regular basis for us in daily fantasy. So that's about all the Detroit love I have. Dylan Larkin is incredibly good, and I've pointed out recently as well that the Rangers are the worst team in the league in terms of um, expected goals against at 5-on-5 over the past like 2 months. They're just getting shelled, really. So Larkin's the type of guy with a really, really strong floor, decent point potential, and he's only 5,800, so he makes a little bit of sense. He's only shooting 5% on the season and 3% over his last 10 games. So there's certainly a buy low sort of mentality here with him, just because he has been pretty productive and he's not getting any sort of shooting luck. So, 5 points and or 5 goals and 25 assists in 36 games. Uh, Certainly not what you would expect, given that he has 2.5 shots per game on the season. Philly at Tampa Bay, both these teams on back-to-backs. Uh, as you might have noticed in my Hoffman take, the Sim loves, loves, loves both of these teams. Well, namely Kucherov, Tavares, Kucherov, Gostisbehere, Voracek, and Stamkos. Steven Stamkos lit it up last night, putting up 9.5 DraftKings points, 7 shots on goal, and 2 goals. Just really, really good night for Steven Stamkos. Interestingly, Kucherov wasn't all that impressive. I think he had 1 assist. He had 1 assist, 2 shots on goal. That was it. So if you spend up for both of them, you're probably not too disappointed. But certainly somewhere uh, within that is a lesson in you don't need to stack every line, even if you like a line, just because like Tampa is so expensive that it's tough to pick between Stamkos and Kucherov. Don't get me wrong, but they're so expensive that if a guy gets 7 or 8 shots on goal and picks up a point, you're not disappointed in the output. But if they don't put up multiple points or that insane number of shots, which it's tough for 2 guys on the same line to do, uh, you're going to struggle to meet value in daily fantasy. So, I guess I'm probably more team don't stack or don't stack as much, the 4-3-1 variety, than a ton of other people are. But it's worked for me. I've had a few sweats here and there, so I'm going to stick with what I enjoy, which is trying to pinpoint shot production on lines that I like to score goals or teams that I like to score goals, which is not an exact science, but certainly it's more of a. I'm certainly not a guy who says, all right, well, I need 4 guys, I need 3 guys, I need 1 guy. If you're following the listener league, you'll certainly notice that as well. If you look at my lineups, just kind of an observation. Not really sure where to go with that on a solo episode. So let's just go right back into Philly at Tampa. You can make an argument for someone like Braden Point or Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson is now back on that first power play, so he's pretty good. I'm not gonna argue with you if you're trying to play Tyler Johnson, but his price is 5,500. He's not gonna give you a significant floor, so really, I think he only makes sense if you're trying to onslaught. And even if you do onslaught, I'm not sure how viable that is. I think there's a few good cheap options, but there's certainly nothing that I'm saying makes it worth it to spend 30, 40,000 on a Tampa team if you're trying to play 4 or 5 of them. So I would just stick to Kucherov, Stamkos if you must, and go from there. The Philly side, Voracek. I mean, Voracek just continues to put up numbers. He's only 6,600, 4.5 DraftKings points per game, 125 shots in less than 40 games now. He is legitimately doing it all. And he's one of those guys who is not getting any sort of luck. I mean, he's only shooting 6% on the season. So when the sim points out Jacob Voracek, I am certainly willing to listen. Let's see. I did see mentioned in the group me yesterday that Travis Konechny was on the first line. I do not believe that came to pass. Yeah, that certainly did not come to pass. The first line yesterday was Couturier, Giroux, Voracek. Konechny got moved down to the Raffle Lawton line, which is, I guess, the third line. Uh, might even be the fourth line, but I guess Nolan Patrick isn't really playing much. So, anyways, I think that was a bit of a false alarm. Uh, they don't really, they don't really love Travis Konechny all that much in Phillies, and especially the way that they mix up their lines a lot. Um, when guys get moved into roles like that, I don't really expect it to last long amounts of time, just because they'll go right back to what works for them, whether it's Couturier, Giroux, Voracek, or Couturier, Giroux, Simmons. Like, they have a top line. They have four guys basically who are top liners for them, and so when a fifth guy pokes his head in there, it's usually not for long. So it's very much GPP only when that happens. I am interested though that Shane Gostisbehere like cracks this top five of the sim. If you've noticed, if you've followed it over time, that's not really all that common. However, Shane Gostisbehere, last 10 games, 4 goals, 4 assists, 34 shots, 10 block shots, doing it all, really, averaging 4.2 fantasy points per game. That is really, really solid for 5,400. And I am probably one of the more willing people to target Tampa just because I like their pace of play even if it doesn't show up in the expected goals or the Corsi measures even, like, they're actually kind of low event by those standards, but if you just watch them, uh, you can kind of see why daily fantasy, like, goodness comes out of them just because especially when that big unit is on the ice, they're just so go, 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 make a lot of pretty plays, and, sometimes that can turn south for a team and leads to odd man rushes and, up and down flow of play, so this is probably my premier game of the night. Certainly helped out by the Sims' strong takes on a number of these guys. So keep keep this game in mind if you're looking to do a game stack or just stacks in general. So Pittsburgh at Carolina. Chris Letang still will not play on Friday, meaning that Oli Mata should get a significant bump in his role. Last game he played 22 minutes along with all the first power play time. Uh, wasn't it wasn't a great game for Oli Mata, but you certainly saw a lot of good things, given that he did not score. He did not pick up a point. Yeah, he had 5 shots on goal and 2 block shots for 3.5 DraftKings points at 3,600. He is now 4,000. So, I don't think he's a must play, but I think that he's about as close as you're going to get, especially if you are buying the notion that Pittsburgh is like actually a good team, which I think you would be foolish not to. I think they're pretty bad defensively in general, but offensively, I still think they're one of the best teams in the league. So taking advantage of that, you know, with Oli Mata at 4,000 makes a lot of sense regardless of their matchup. So the big guns are still the big guns. I would probably side with Patrick Hornqvist over the rest of them. It's tough to see Crosby at 7.3 and just not want to jam him in because, like, he's still pretty freaking incredible. Yeah, he's actually 7.4. But I mean, the production just really has not been there for Crosby. He's not shooting much. He's not really picking up the same number of points that he has been. So I'm going to go back to the Hornqvist well, where we know that he's historically been a really solid shot producer and plays that premier power play role for them. So just something like that makes sense. But I'm not very keen on any of these Pittsburgh guys. Given the matchup with Carolina, I would probably just stick to Oli Mata for my cash consideration. Carolina side, we saw Sebastian Aho put up a pretty huge game in their most recent tilt against the Montreal Canadiens. He picked up a power play goal and an empty netter in a 3-1 victory. So we're seeing their top line, Aho, Stahl, Teravainen, stay together at 5-on-5 and on the power play. That's probably where I would start. Seems like their units are pretty back to normal. They were flirting with different guys in different spots, like Jordan Stahl was with Skinner for a bit, but that seems to have gone right back to the normal. I guess really the only other thing worth noting is that Skinner's centers kind of flip-flopped throughout the game last game. It looks like Rask and Derek Ryan pretty much split time. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not too in love with any of the Carolina guys. I think I would just stick to Sebastian Aho, given that he is 5,300 and a very solid volume shooter, coming off two pretty good games in a row, 7 DraftKings points, 8.5 DraftKings points, and with the uncertainty in the bottom or the middle two lines, I think that Aho, Stahl, Teravainen is where I am leaning towards here. Uh, and then, interestingly, Aho is almost certainly the best daily fantasy asset on that line. Yet he is, I mean, like he is the cheapest of all of them. He and Jordan Stahl the same price. Teravainen's 300 more, so they make sense as a line stack, given that they're only 16,000 for the lot of them. Um, and you can certainly see them putting up multiple goals against a Pittsburgh team lacking Chris Letang, and even with Letang, was not that good defensively. So I like that line a lot. I think there's a lot of value there. And add him in with Justin Falk, who plays with them on the power play, should get some 5-on-5 exposure, 4,500, for some extra bit of correlation there. So let's go to Nashville, Minnesota. As soon as we go there, I don't think there's any part of this that I want a piece of. Like Nashville is, they're fine. Looking at the standings, oh, that got messed up. Looking at the standings, they're 6-2-2 over their last 10, while Minnesota is they're still struggling to get back in the playoff spot. So, looking at the way Nashville rolled their lines last time out against the St. Louis Blues, we did see that pretty much the entire game went with Johansson, Arvidsson together, and then Forsberg separate from them, except for on the power play, obviously. But I mean, Forsberg is now playing with Pontus Aberg and Kai Youngcrow. Like that's not something that I'm chomping at the bit to get a piece of. So, and last game, all their minutes were just boosted heavily by a severe lack of ability for St. Louis to stay out of the box. I would not. That's not characteristic of St. Louis either, certainly, but it's also not a characteristic of the Minnesota Wild. So I'm probably apt to just stick with Arvidsson if I need someone from this game, but I absolutely do not. But the reason I pick Arvidsson is because he's gone from high sixes to now 6,000, and Minnesota's been a pretty juicy matchup if you've continued to ignore me when I tell you that Minnesota's a good defensive team, because that's really not been the case lately. So, yeah, I mean, Victor Arvidsson makes sense. Again, PK Subban stuck on that first power play unit, so I think he's a better daily fantasy play than Roman Josi, given that they're pretty much similar floor guys, and I think that the power play upside of Subban is greater than that of Josi. So when you consider the $1,000 price difference on DraftKings, that's probably why you should go Subban over Josi. Minnesota side, uh, you know, Jared Spurgeon had a huge game last game. Uh, he had a goal and 7 blocks plus shots. He had a goal get waved off at because he scored it maybe a split second after the buzzer. Like it was really close. And Spurgeon's a huge floor guy. However, he's still lost out on that role to Matt Dumba. And Matt Dumba, again, really high up in the sim again as well. So playing 26 minutes a night, power play one time, I think he's a decent option, but I don't really think that 4,500 is any sort of great play against a strong team in Nashville. So going to the Islanders at Winnipeg, people seem to be just falling all over themselves for this game. I'm a bit concerned given that the Islanders are going on the road to Winnipeg. Winnipeg's not been a juicy DFS team this season, in by looking at the expected goals figures at least. So I'm kind of thinking that with no Scheifele, Winnipeg really tries to play a bit more sound defensive game. Uh, they're rolling out Blake Wheeler at center, which is, I guess, strange to say the least. He is centering Kyle Connor and Patrick Laine, so Laine gets a significant boost. Should get a boost in ice time as well, up from 17 maybe to about 19 or 20 minutes, which is certainly lovely. First power play, Scheifele will be just straight up replaced by Adam Lowry, which, I mean, guy plays decent amount of minutes a night and is only 3,400. So could you do dumber things? I think so, but certainly not a flashy option. And then no Bufflin, so Jacob Trouba remains in play, even though now he's 5,100. He's kind of reaching that point where I'm a bit hesitant to play him at all, really. But he's at almost 5 blocks plus shots per game over the last 10, and the minutes will be there, and the power play one role will be there as well. So, uh, Islander side, Tavares, Barzal, pretty good. Josh Bailey got robbed by Robin Lehner, still a goal because that's the life of a Buffalo sports fan. Um, yeah, I mean we know the guys here. Johnny Boychuk is out for yeah, he's on the DL. I want to say he's out for at least a week or yeah, he's week to week. So that is yeah, that's grade A chance for Ryan Pulak to play alongside Nick Leddy again. I'm going to see if they had pairings yet. No, they haven't because they haven't done morning skate because they are in Winnipeg. So do keep an eye on that because Ryan Pulak is pretty amazing. If he plays alongside Nick Leddy, he's going to see a lot of minutes and he's going to use his really just strong DFS relevant game at 3,000 to just, basically make himself almost a cash lock. If he plays on a bottom pairing, like he's been playing with Dennis Seidenberg the past couple times, so that's just dumb. I have no interest in him if that's the case. I should say no interest. I have some interest given his power play 2 role. But with Boychuk out, Ryan Pulak is a guy you should certainly keep an eye on as he's just a really talented offensive guy who blocks shots, shoots the puck a lot, obviously, given that he has a rifle, and gives you pretty nice exposure to an Islanders team that I think will be super duper popular. Um, so St. Louis at Dallas. St. Louis continues to just really terribly struggle without Shaden Schwartz. Shen and Tarasenko are just not getting it done at this moment. So, yeah, Dallas has really been fixed by Hitch. I guess that's kind of a cliche term, but like Hitch came in and they're like one of the lowest paced teams in the NHL right now. So, make of that what you will. It's definitely not the same team we've seen year over year. So, with that said, on the road, I have no interest in a St. Louis team. I don't really think there are many spots that I would be overly interested in attacking. Even that Patrick Berglund only played 16 minutes last game, even though he was supposed to have like that nice role alongside Shen and Tarasenko, they're just not really doing it right now. And his price has jumped from 3,300 all the way up to 3,800. So better values there, in my opinion. And Dallas continues to do Dallas things by switching up their lines pretty much every game. But with that said, they've maintained a pretty steady top 6 with basically Ben Sagan Shore, Janmark, Hansel, Radulov. Hansel being a relatively new addition to that top 6. So, yeah, I'm certainly interested. Looks like they switched up the power play last game too, which I really love because now they have Klingberg, Sagan, Ben surround them with Matthias Janmark and Brett Ritchie. Janmark is someone who I am just obsessed with as a player overall. He is super duper talented. He's not a terrible rate shooter, and he's only 3,300 still. Like, he's averaging about 17, 18 minutes a night. He's been firmly in the top 6, so I think the points will come for him. God, if he's on the power play, I mean, that's where he scored last game. He had a 5 fantasy point night. 3,300 for Matthias Janmark against a team in St. Louis that is incredibly banged up. They can't do anything now with no Jaden Schwartz. I wish I knew what could fix them because they were a team that I was super duper high on, especially when they came out of the gates flying. Um, but yeah, now they're 4-6 in their last 10, and really no signs of life otherwise. So Matthias Janmark, 3,300. I think he's the top winger value for you. And that's really where I'm probably going to start my lineups. You can play him with Tyler Seguin. Do note that as of last game, they weren't 5-on-5 correlated, but they have been a number of times throughout the season. So even if they aren't, uh, listed on the same line today, I think you can stack them given the power play 1 exposure and the fact that Dallas loves to put their lines in blenders all the time. Toronto at Colorado. Toronto just played in a hellaciously fun game on Thursday night, beating the Arizona Coyotes 7-4. I believe the final tally was. Um, yeah, let me check that real quick because it might have been 6. Yeah, 7-4. Just some box score reading. Mitch Marner had a huge night. Goal, 2 assists, 2 shots on goal. Still only played 15 minutes, which is just really shitty. I don't like that. Patrick Marleau, 2 goals, 4 shots, an assist. Nylander, multi-point night as well. Morgan Rielly, multi-point night with 6 shots plus blocks. That equals pretty good. So Toronto did Toronto things last night. I just don't know if they'll do it again against Colorado. None of these guys stand out to me. None of these guys individually stand out to me for their daily fantasy, upside, floor, price combo. Mitch Marner's probably my favorite, given that, maybe his shooting luck is turning around. He's gone from shooting, I think, 0% on the season, really. He might have had 1 or 2 goals yeah, he had like 2 goals in their first 30-something games. Now he's at 3 in his last 4. And he's putting the puck on that a lot. Last 4 games, he has a combined 18 shots on goal because math is hard. He's really just doing a great job for daily fantasy purposes. My top target there. JT Compher for Colorado just continues to produce. He's not been overly flashy. However, he's 3,800, and over the last 10 games, he's averaging 4 blocks plus shots per game. If you can tell me 3,800, you get 2 points in floor alone, and then from there, maybe you pick up a point on the first power play, or even on the penalty kill, because that's where JT Compher's playing. 18 minutes a night, first power play, top penalty killer, strong shooter. JT Compher makes a ton of sense here. And then on defense, with Tyson Barrie out, let me just do a quick check to see what they did with their power play. Let's see. Last game, with Barrie out, they used Erik Johnson on the first power play and Samuel Girard on the second. So Girard didn't see a lot of minutes. Erik Johnson, though, played 26 minutes. It seems like he's really going to become their featured guy now that Barrie is gone. So Erik Johnson, 50 blocks plus shots over the last 10 games, power play 1 time. He's only 4.8. So I think, you can pretty much compare him to a guy like Jacob Trouba. And I personally kind of like Erik Johnson's game a little bit more than Trouba. And both have really good matchups, however. I should mention that because, while the Islanders are one of the top teams to game stack with in the NHL, Toronto's definitely one of those teams as well. So 2 guys with injury-related news at really nice mid-tier prices with really strong shot floors and power play 1 time in Johnson and Trouba. So 2 pretty good cash game, similar type players right there. And that's pretty much where I stand on this game. Like, Samuel Girard is really good. He's only 2.8. Ooh, excuse me. Um, but yeah, 2.8 for a guy who's playing power play 2 times is all right, but he's only averaging like he's probably only going to play 16 to 17 minutes at most, and the points really haven't been there for him. That's not really who he profiles as, anyways. So maybe give him some time, but at the moment, I think Pulock is a much better play at the price. All right, Chicago Edmonton. Chicago just got embarrassed by the Fighting Thomas Vanek Brock Bessers on Thursday. Um, but with that came a new line of sorts as Artem Anisimov got hurt. So um, how the I guess how that impacted things is Nick Schmaltz moved from the second unit to the first power play. Alex DeBrincat did as well, replacing Brent Seabrook. So there goes Seabrook's value um, as a first power play guy. So yeah, I mean, both of those guys are relatively cheap. Both played with Patrick Kane at 5-on-5 for a spell last game when Anisimov went out. It appears to me as if so anyways, DeBrincat and Schmaltz are both sub 5K, so mid fours for each of them. I think those are really strong prices against Edmonton, as well as a guy named David Kampf for Chicago. Played his first game on Thursday, 2.5 on DraftKings. He's listed as a center. He's 22 and had 17 points in 30 AHL games this year, so he's not spectacular by any means. But why that's important is that he played a decent amount with Patrick Kane last game. So he killed penalties as well, played 14 minutes on the night. 2.5 for a center. I certainly have no problem with that if you're just looking to punt center and spend up elsewhere. Maybe that's a way you get to a Tampa onslaught or something like that. You play Janmark, you play Kampf, and then just load up on whatever guys you want and fill in the rest. So maybe some value opening up on the slate, but keep an eye on that sort of news. As he could be a healthy scratch or whatever, but I don't expect so, given that it seems like Anisimov is out for the foreseeable future, and there's Lance Boma, Tommy Wingles in their lineup, who might be more likely to be scratched anyways. So, all right, Edmonton side. Yep, Edmonton has Connor McDavid. Therefore, anyone who touches the ice with Connor McDavid ever could just score a goal because that's what he does. I could have scored that goal that Draisaitl scored last time out, where McDavid burned a guy at the point on a power play, or sorry, penalty kill, I suppose, because that's where McDavid was playing. I just skates by him, not even no one in the same area code as him, so poor goalie, like right now, oh, McDavid's got a breakaway, like what am I gonna do? Here comes Mr. Draisaitl, screaming down the other side of the ice, cuts back to the middle, McDavid cuts back to the middle, poor goalie thinks McDavid's gonna deke, maybe beat him backhand or something. Nope, he leaves a drop pass. And the goalie is just gone in the corner, in the locker room, undressing, packing his bags, heading out for the team bus, and Draisaitl puts it in the net. So that is the Leon Draisaitl story. They play together power play and penalty kill, not 5-on-5 currently, but that really shouldn't matter as Draisaitl is 5,100 and is averaging over 4 fantasy points over his last 10 games. So, that's just a really solid price for a guy in Draisaitl who, I think he's fairly priced given that I think he's a bit overrated as like a player in general, but that could just be my anti-Edmonton bias creeping in because they have Connor McDavid who makes everyone look 8 times better than they actually are. But yeah, I mean, even McDavid at 7,500, really strong GPP play. I don't know if I would go there in cash games, but I think it makes sense given that he has the most upside of maybe any player in the league, and he's only the 4th most expensive center on this slate. And there are seven. Yeah, he is the 7th, tied for 7th most expensive player on the slate, and he obviously has slate-breaking capabilities. Lastly, Klefbom still remains on the DL. So Andres No, that's right. Clefbaum actually should be back tonight. Um, so expect Clefbaum to step in to Sekera's power play one role, and Clefbaum at 4,700 could make some sense. But I'm kind of more in a wait and see mode with him, given that I think Truba and Eric Johnson at their prices are maybe a bit more interesting because I think they'll play more minutes on the whole. Um, but yeah, another guy in Clefbaum who's mid to high fours with really strong floor numbers. Not a lot of point production, but they have power play one time in their future. So let's look at that. Then lastly, last game of the night before we head into Friday, Calgary at Anaheim. Anaheim obliterated the Vegas Golden Knights at 5-on-5 last time out. Had something like 68% of the 5-on-5 expected goals in the game. But goalie is goalie. Malcolm Subban bailed them out time and time again. However, we get a relatively rested Anaheim team against a Calgary team on a road back-to-back. Rickard Rakell has goals in 3 straight, averaging 4 shots a game over those 3. Actually had over the last 4. He's also averaging 4 shots a game. 5,300 for Rickard Rakell does not make sense. Do not overthink this. Just continue playing Rickard Rakell. He is incredibly good at professional ice hockey. He is playing with Ryan Getzlaf, who I think there is no arguing that he is also incredibly good at professional ice hockey. Um, and yeah, even my boy Brandon Montour just still continues to put up numbers. 3,400 for this guy, and all he does is play really good daily fantasy style hockey. Um, he's now their number one penalty killer, which I don't think that makes any sort of sense, but he's been leading the team in penalty killing, playing with the now returned Ryan Kessler last game, who was absolutely their number one penalty killer. So, Brandon Montour, 3,400, just insane production continues. It's not often you see defensemen at over a half point per game, especially not ones with the sort of floor numbers that Montour provides at $3,400 for daily fantasy. So that is that. Backlund Tkachuk paid off on Thursday night against the Sharks. I believe Backlund had something like 4 or 5 shots on goal, ended up scoring. Matthew Tkachuk got robbed in overtime. Would have been a smash night for him as well, otherwise, as he had an assist on that goal. And as we brought up on yesterday's, or actually, we brought it up on yesterday's podcast. However, in Morningscape, they switched things up a little bit as far as Calgary goes. Their power play one, they replaced Jankowski on that first unit with Michael Backlund, which I think makes more sense personally. So now the first unit, as of yesterday, read Monahan, Gaudreau, Backlund, Tkachuk, Giordano. So that Backlund Tkachuk stack just really strong. Michael Frolik did get hurt, so you should see a new partner with them at 5-on-5. Might be Jaromir Jagr, might be someone else. Not entirely sure, but we know that Backlund Tkachuk line dominates possession. They're super cheap right now, and they're both playing on a number one power play that should be pretty good against a team in Anaheim that now they're at full strength. I don't think they're as targetable defensively, but they are bottom 5 in the NHL in expected goals against on the season. So certainly there's a reason to playing Calgary. So all right, let me guarantee a couple goals and get on out of here so I can post this bad boy and have it to you, the beloved listener. So pretty simply, I'm just going to go with my guy, uh, Rickard Rakell, Ricky Rax, going to make it 4 straight games with a goal. So looking in the mid 6K range for another guy, I'm going to go with Artemi Panarin. He's playing such a huge role for this Columbus team. Really love the way that their line is playing now as the past month. Like, it's just incredible seeing what Josh Anderson has done. But Artemi Panarin has not moved in price. He started at 6,200. He is now 6,400. Panarin or Dubois Anderson started at mid threes. They're now at 6K. So really just doesn't make a lot of sense. Dubois is actually 5.2, but point stands. Um, Panarin hasn't really been adjusted to reflect his newfound line that can score goals, which in Columbus is kind of a new thing. So I really like them. I really like those two stacks as well. Columbus won and Anaheim won. So yeah, hopefully this gave you a good start to your process. Hopefully you get a chance to listen to this in the 8 hours before the slate goes live. And yeah, be sure to follow us on Twitter at MorningscapePod and check out the site, morningscapepod.com. We have the sim up. Mentioned a few guys that the sim really likes tonight. Check it out to see the rest of them. And yeah, stay tuned for I believe Monday or Tuesday may be a difficult one to get a podcast out for, as I will be at the outdoor game in New York City on New Year's Day. Will not be getting home in any sort of time to record, and I also have work on Tuesday, which will not be fun. But yeah, so don't really expect a pod there. Stay tuned to the group me on Tuesday for takes or whatever, but not something that's gonna be uh, not something that's likely to be posted unless DJ steps up, and I'm sure he's busy as well, having to go back to school or whatever on New Year's Day. So actually, I guess he wouldn't be going back to school on New Year's Day. Anyways, let's just end it there. We'll talk about the schedule later. Hopefully, someone can overtake me in the listener league. I am tied for first in the month of December. So 3 days left. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's get it, boys. Join the group me. And that's about it. So from Doug, DJ, from myself, have a good sleep, everybody, and we will see ya.